Hey everybody, it is Ayla, Wife with a Purpose. Thanks for joining me this evening for my regular Thursday show. I'm so glad you all could be here. I hope you've been having a really great week so far and that you're looking forward to a terrific weekend. I have a wonderful guest tonight. I'm really excited about this guest. He has got an amazing story to tell, an amazing life he is leading, and a terrific future ahead, I believe, for him. Plus, him and I are a bit comrades in arms in a way. A lot of the treatment he received is very similar to some of the things I've been through in the past year. So I'm really excited to have a chance to just kind of sit down and pick his brain about what he learned and through his experience. And hopefully we can share some things with you guys tonight as the ever hungry media presence tries to pick at any carcass they can for their 15-minute fix. Any one of us could be on their radar next, and it's good to have a little bit of a game plan in your back pocket and know what to expect going in. And I think tonight's guest can help us navigate those waters a bit from his experience. Remember, please, we've got the chat is open. And you can also use the super chat feature now. That is a new feature I have here on my show. If you want to support my work and want to support what I do and make it so that I can do more interviews, I really appreciate it. Don't forget, you can always go to wifewithapurpose.com/support. There's lots of ways to support me, including PayPal, paypal.me/wifewithapurpose. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my guest. I might butcher his last name, but let me try this out. This is Tom Kawczynski.
Kawczynski. You were close.
Kawczynski. Okay. Just Kawczynski. Like there's the W in there. It's throwing me.
Yeah, no. Well, the problem is in Polish it sounds like a V, so it sounds like Kawczynski. But yeah, no. In English, it's very simple.
Right. Okay. Kawczynski. I'm actually going to just make a little phonetic.
No, that's what I do when I send things. The word cause, the word in, the word ski, Makes it easier.
Yes. Kawczynski. All right. Awesome. Well, I have heard, so I did a little Google searching. Of course, I watched you on Red Ice a few days ago. Great interview that Lana gave, and did a little Google research on you also before I started. Tonight when I was eating my dinner, I just kind of Googled your name. I wanted to see what came up. And according to the Washington Post, you've been shockingly offensive.
Yeah, so, no, I take it as a badge of honor. The Washington Post has great views on everything,
Oh, exactly. Well, and that is a great way to look at it. I like that. So this is one of the reasons I'm excited to speak with you this evening, because I really enjoyed a lot of the comments that you had to make when you were on Red Ice with Lana. You had a really great outlook on this that I appreciate. So you are a former town manager, okay, of a little town up in Maine. So give us a little bit of your background. How did you get to be a town manager? Where is this in Maine that we're talking about? Give us a little backstory here.
Yeah, sure. So I was the town manager of Jackman, Maine. It's a small community of about 900 people. It's about 15 minutes from the border with Canada in the northwest portion of Maine. So very isolated, very remote town. Usually wouldn't get any media attention for anything. But, if you say certain things, you draw attention to yourself. And what happened was about 3 weeks ago, a story was written in the Bangor Daily News, which is kind of like a daily tabloid paper in one of the bigger towns in Maine. And what they had done was they went through my social media, like you, I use Gab quite a bit. And I was on there and I had made, I think, 10,000 posts. I'm a pretty active social media guy. And so they found the 4 or 5 most potentially offensive comments I made and painted a narrative around them to make me look basically evil. And after that, it was kind of off to the races. And 3 days later, with a whole bunch of print media and coming after me, I ended up losing my job. There was a settlement about it, but I didn't back down at any point on it because my position is that I have the right to exercise my freedom of speech. And, the comments that got me into trouble specifically were questioning how Islam fits into our civilization and whether or not that's a natural fit. And also saying that people have the right to free association, which apparently you're not allowed to have in America anymore because you have to believe what they believe. And if not, the Washington Post will find you shockingly offensive and use much nastier words than that, to be sure.
Yes, definitely. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask, what were these so-called shockingly offensive things? So basically, they took issue with you questioning whether Islamic culture is something that fits in well with Western culture, and you kind of asserting that people have the right to free association. And so I guess for people who might be kind of new to this side of politics or new to this discussion, I mean, basically free association is something that happens when you go to church. Basically, nobody forces anyone in our country to go to church. So if you decide you want to go to a church, you're free to associate with any church you want. So if you want to go to a predominantly Black church, or a Latino mass, that's in Spanish, if you're Catholic, whatever kind of service you want to go to, that's free association. And so a lot of people don't realize, I think, that white people in America we don't have the right to freely associate outside of picking a church service. And even then, if we're picking a church service that's predominantly white, or we say we prefer not to go to a Black service, or maybe a mass in Spanish, or whatever it would be, a Spanish service, then we are labeled racist for not for not wanting to participate in that and not wanting to be with our own. But it certainly is never extended to us that we are allowed to say, well, I would like to live in a white community, I would like to live in a white neighborhood, I would like to live in a predominantly white town, even though we can see from numerous examples in people's personal lives, as well as popular culture, Black people, Latino people, etc., saying, I want to live amongst my people and do business with my people and support my people, and that's all fine. But the free association of white people to interact with white people, or prefer to interact with white people, at least as the majority, is very frowned upon. So of course, to me, these comments that you made don't seem shockingly offensive at all. They seem quite reasonable to
they are, the comments in support of it have been about 80-20 positive, but the problem is the comment section aren't the people writing the aren't writing the stories, and the editors like to sell a certain headline, because the whole system really is based on this inequity that I think you covered nicely, where if I was a Black person or a Latino or from a Native American tribe and I positively asserted my identity, that would be seen as an empowering action. But if you are a white person in America, you are not allowed to go ahead and say, hey, I am proud to be white. And I will tell you this, I represent a town that's 98% white in a state that's 94% white. So as someone who was holding public office, it seems like the responsible thing of me to do would be to be concerned with the issues that affect the people who are there, which if you live in northern New England, that's going to be a lot of white people. And it's one of those things where, without prejudice to other people and their views, we do have a certain culture up here. We have a set of ideas we promote, and within that is positive identity for everybody, including white people.
Yes, exactly. And so, as you're pointing out, you're living in an overwhelmingly white community. Why would you not be concerned with white interests? What's wrong with that? I mean, obviously, so not shockingly offensive, not crazy at all. But the SPLC has said that you have white nationalist views. I think even Fox said that you were that they termed it a white supremacist firestorm. Mm-hmm. And that you called for the separation of the races. Now, this quote in particular, calling for the separation of the races, that stood out to me, because that has actually happened to me recently. I kind of have an ongoing relationship with the press over the past year. And when my Twitter account was deleted recently by Twitter, that was one of the headlines in the Salt Lake Tribune, was that I had called for the separation of the races, when in fact I had done nothing of the sort at any point.
Sure.
And I had only ever advocated what we talked about earlier, which was free association, and free association for all people, white people, Mexicans, Blacks, whoever you are, to freely associate, to live where you want to live, to work where you want to work, and to, attend whichever church you want to attend, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's very interesting to me that word for word, that these news organizations that targeted you use the same phrasing that they did when they targeted me, which makes me, obviously it rings some bells for me that this isn't about you, and it isn't about what you've said. Right. It isn't about me, and it isn't about what I've actually said. It's about this narrative that they're trying to push, making ordinary people like a Utah mom or a town manager of a small community in Maine to make us look like we're somehow evil and we're going sure. Reincarnation of the Third Reich.
That's exactly right. The thing about it is they need comic book villains when they don't have common sense philosophy and policy. And the sad thing about the left is there was a time in this country when you could have made an argument the left was looking out for the interest of poor people, but a long time ago they let go of that, and instead they decided they were going to have a form of cultural Marxism and warfare of pitting people against people. And literally, if you go to any university or read any popular, thing, they talk about white privilege and whiteness as some evil thing. So basically, they can't afford a positive sense of white identity because all they do is play on these politics of resentment to keep, for lack of a better term, minorities as a captive voting bloc. And it's sad and it's cynical because it's not to their benefit or our benefit. All people could be, successful as Americans, and we could think of it in those terms, but that's not a pathway to power, and I think that's at the heart of why they do this. And as you said, there is an agenda out there, and I think the agenda is very clear that it is an anti-white agenda. If you look at diversity, for instance, it's only ever imposed in one direction. No one's arguing that we need to send more Swedes down to Africa. You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen that way. And, maybe they would go, and if they do, God bless them. But realistically, what we've seen in the past, since 1965 at least, is, the imposition of people of different cultures and different backgrounds on our country without really having the consent of the people. Anytime people are polled about this and they have a chance to vote, they say they do not want this because they want resources committed to the problems Americans face here of all races and ethnicities. But yet we continue importing more people whose only qualification had been winning a lottery. And I wonder if that's good public policy or not. I would argue it isn't. I live in northern New England, which has a very unique culture, small towns, communities that take care of each other. We didn't really go into the Walmart boom as much as some people, so we didn't get those hollowed out areas. And so we try to keep it afloat, but for that to work, you need a lot of trust. And I live in a high trust society, really. I don't lock my door at night because I feel safe doing that. And I think a part of that is honestly that we live in a uniculture in many ways where we give up certain things, the option of having these experiences, but we enjoy greater tranquility and ability to work together. And, they always go out there, especially up here in Maine, where they promote this idea of diversity, but they never talk that the price of diversity is unity, where you don't have people who are able to trust each other. Because if you have different cultures, obviously they have different beliefs of truth and how you live and what you want to achieve. And when you have those core ideas of how you live put into conflict with one another, there's going to be misunderstandings, and that can rise to violence or, at least a high cost of integration. And, I always hear people on the left talk about, well, immigration was great. We were a melting pot. And there's some truth in that. But we also had one culture then that people were assimilating into. Now we live in a society where you're not allowed to assert right over wrong or values. So you don't have a culture people are assimilating to. You basically are bringing in new ghettos into areas where people are not assimilating. And what I've seen up here is the government strategy is to bring in so many people into these areas that they fundamentally change what it means to be living in those places. And so I'm someone who just does not want to see that happen in my community. I never got to vote about it. I never got to say anything about it. And if I dare to speak out about it, which I do with my new Albion movement, a cultural movement up here, then they'll say, oh, you're a racist and you're prejudiced. I'm like, I'm someone who believes in ideas. And then they'll say to me, well, why are you against those ideas? You can't judge people based on ideas. And I'm like, if you can't judge people based on their thoughts, how are you supposed to have any sort of civilization? But this is what these people believe, that you can just believe anything and put anyone together and it will work. And, it's just not that simple. It'd be nice if life worked that way, but it doesn't.
Oh, I agree. And I think that one of the things that we need to get back to in our society, and particularly us who are kind of more the founding stock of America, kind of the white Christian people, descendants from the original American founders, need to have a lot more conviction when it comes to a few areas. We need to definitely assert that there is no such thing as this equality of all ideas and equality of all cultures and everything within all cultures. We need to be able to stand firm and say, no, we have morals, we have standards. Our civilization and our culture here in America has certain principles that we are going to stand firm for, and we don't want to try to pretend as though Islam or any other culture that's coming in here is equal to our culture. We want to be able to say, no, this is our culture. These are our boundaries. These are our rules. In fact, I was at a religious meeting last night for my church, and somebody had made a remark of, oh, well, everybody believes what they want to believe. And I said, in the context of talking to a larger group, I agree that would be the right thing to say. But we all here are sitting here, we go to the same church. At least in this incident, you can say, hey, we're right and they're wrong. Like, just have a little courage about the values
Right.
you hold and expressing those. There's no reason to fear that anymore. And I think that we have been so shamed and so taught this culture of fear around our own morals and values that we're afraid to say anything pro-white, pro-Christian, pro-American, pro our country at all. It's considered, oh, we're going to offend somebody. That's our first thought.
Well, it's not even just that, though, right? It's the consequences you and I have both experienced. It's not just to say that, that someone will be offended by you. I mean, let's be honest. We've been through witch hunts, and what people who haven't been through this can't understand is how quickly and rapidly media resources are applied to go ahead and destroy you. And the thing is, it's the misleading headline. Basically, what I faced, and I don't know if your experience was the same, was 30 versions of the same article, recycling the same quotes with ever more damaging headlines. And look, I live in a small town of 900 people. So what does this look like on the ground? They see all these articles being posted. They see news crews come up here. And what doesn't get told in the story is there was a group of progressives that were going around quite intentionally. They brought a bunch of signs up here, promoted some petty vandalism. They also were downvoting every local business, like a lot of small towns on, roads going between places. We rely on tourism. So it was a full court press that really looked like it was a bunch of people, but in reality, it was probably 20 people. And as time went by, one of the things about the sort of radical leftists who like to present themselves as the mainstream is they like to gloat. So I had an opportunity about a week after the fact to kind of learn who put this together. And basically, it was a hit piece right from progressives. Literally, I was chased down by a furry, which, if you know what that is, it's just absolutely disgusting to me. But this guy who goes around dressed as a human stuffed animal is the moral center. And me, who's arguing for the foundation of Western civilization, is awful. I mean, I don't know how you're supposed to have these arguments anymore, but this is literally how the thing happened. And it's kind of crazy, but this is what the media does. They are spoon-fed something by, say, a group like the SPLC, who's funded by some very questionable people. And, even the name of it. I mean, let's look at it real honestly. Southern Poverty Law Center. First off, what are they doing if not arguing for policies that keep the South poor? I mean, they're playing groups against each other and creating a situation where they encourage perpetual victimhood instead of really addressing the issues of the community they purport to represent. Besides that, I mean, if you talk about being Southern, I mean, I'm literally 15 miles from the Canadian border. They're kind of out of their area, but that's okay. I knew the alphabet soup was coming, and I understand that. And look, they're liars and they're frauds. And independent media, like you're doing here, and like I'm going to be doing soon, is how we begin disputing that, so that people can have the courage to speak up and know at least their voice will be heard. One of the things that really inspired me through my process was how many people reached out to me through this whole thing and said, don't give up, don't give an inch. And I didn't, because I wasn't wrong. And there's a difference between having a personal belief and acting unprofessionally. I could understand where if I was being someone who was very rotten to an individual who came in while I was doing as town manager, that people would be upset with me. But that was never even in question. I handled myself with professional decorum. I had just gotten a raise actually the month before, and was well liked, and still am to some extent liked in my community. So, because I just, you treat people with respect, and it's okay. I mean, people have constitutional rights to believe what they want to believe. But with that right becomes the implicit responsibility of those of us who have different beliefs to engage them, to talk through our differences, and encourage them or us to find greater wisdom by talking to one another. And that's the part they don't want to allow. They don't want to say, hey, I have a set of ideas, you have a set of ideas, let's debate. They want to say, you're a racist, you're a liar, you're a bigot, you're a Nazi. And you know what? It's counter-effective. And all they're doing, actually, is creating the very boogeyman they're afraid of, because people aren't allowed to speak up. And I hate to say it, but, if you make it where the majority are unable to express common sense views through, free speech and political action, well, then you shouldn't be surprised if something more radical emerges, because I think that's where we're heading. And maybe they want that, but I don't think they'll like where that's going to head to. And I think it'll be very sad for a lot of people who are oblivious to this sort of conflict that's stewing and growing as more people like ourselves end up in a position where we're being forced to be more vocal and be more aggressive, honestly, because they just have no interest in conversing. They just want to censor us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I had a similar experience in that they just used me for clickbait. And what I noticed, and what I recommend to people when they're talking about things of this nature, or they're going public with these views, or even if they have an anonymous account but they're afraid they'll get found out, is try not to give them a wedge issue. And one of the things that they want is if possible, because what they do with these clickbait headlines that they used for myself and you is they found the wedge issue, because racist housewife isn't exactly as much of a headline, but they wanted to bring the Mormon church into it, and especially the press in Utah, which of course is liberal, and all the liberal press in Utah hates the Mormon church, which has a lot of conservative influence in that state. So that was the wedge issue for me. I could have probably spoken to what I spoke about on my YouTube and Twitter for a great many more years had I not publicly been Mormon and given them that wedge issue with which to drum up these dramatic headlines of this racist Mormon housewife, da 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 da. Sure. And I think for you, the wedge issue that they used was your position, because you worked as a town manager. Which is,
sure, they hate the idea of someone being up there trying to actually make positive change happen. As you know, they're the only ones ever allowed to be in government. And it doesn't matter how progressive your division is. If I had gone out there talking about how we needed to create a black enclave in Jackman, and that I wanted to bring in, an Islamic center, even though that would be just as prejudicial, I would probably be getting an award right now in Augusta about progressive thinking. And and those movements are well funded, and it's one of the things about the right that I think sometimes people miss, as someone who's been in government now for a while, is that just because you don't get involved with it doesn't mean that they don't impact your life, right? The taxes they take, the policies they make. And I hope more people, discreetly, as you maybe wisely suggest, get involved and make a difference. And I know another wedge issue in my case was I had been a vocal Trump supporter. So, of course, they were trying to defame the president by going after me, and I think that was something they felt very strongly about. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the other side of it, I guess, is this: at some point you just have to call truth to power. And I had been publishing things publicly under my own name. I've never used a pseudonym. My screen name is Tom Kawczynski. I'm not hiding who I am. And I knew there was a potential for this sort of risk. But in my own personal calculus, thanks to a very loving and supporting wife who stands with me in this, we knew a time was coming when people would have to speak up as well. And so my life is transitioning now. Absent some major changes, my career in the public sector is over. So now I am an advocate, and I go out there and I speak about these things, and we'll be writing about these things and living this fight. Because honestly, if we let them have their way, there's nowhere good this is going to end up. And I would hope that people, who understand this, really step up to help those like yourself and me who are out there, making these voices heard. Because right now, the other side's incredibly well funded. They're incredibly well supported, and they have a whole media machine behind them. And I think we have to do a lot of work to deconstruct that. And I think one thing that got them after me to keep coming after me as they have is because I've sort of put together a pragmatic, culturally based vision of how we compete against them, getting people organized with positive imagery. My new Albion movement has core values of the family and the lands we occupy, talking about nature, culture, legacy, heritage, and community. These are mainstream American values that they find objectionable, and that's fine. I'm willing to fight them on those terms, and we'll fight them verbally first, and if we have to go farther, then it's worth it. But that's kind of what I think we need a little bit of courage, a little bit of strength. And when people like you and I speak out, we give strength to the people who are thinking this way, because we are the majority, and people do want these ideas and they want this discussion, and we can continue that. And I think that that's really where it needs to go. And then we just have to find ways to be more effective in taking back the power from the people who present themselves as our betters. They're not. They're incredibly radical. They're trying to deconstruct, at least 200 years of American history, and I'd argue 500 years of European history, to make America into something that it never was, never wanted to be, and would be terrible for everyone of every race and ethnicity, because we would lose our identity and what makes us distinct and free.
Oh, yes, definitely. I would even argue that they're trying to deconstruct 6,000 years of Western ideals to begin with and take us back to a form of absolute chaos. And I think it's really important what you pointed out about not backing down, and what I think makes your story really strong and very intriguing is that you didn't back down. I think they were pressuring you to quit, as I understand, and you said, I'm not going to quit. You continue to speak out. And I know a lot of people have told me, friends and family, and said, well, why don't you just quit? Why don't you quit? They continue to come after you once they've made you into this villain. And I said, well, what would I gain by that? My name is already out there. My husband's name, everything is out there already. They're already attacking us on every front that they can. I need to keep speaking out. It's even more important now than ever that I continue to do what I'm doing. And that's why I love that you are, putting all of this experience into this New Albion. And so for those who don't know, newalbion.org, check it out, New England, preserving New England culture. And that was a big thing that I wanted to talk with you about this evening as well. I'll just pause for a second and let anybody who's joining us know that I'm Ayla, wife with a purpose. And tonight I'm talking with Tom Kawczynski. And he is a former town mayor in Maine who was forced out of his position recently because he questioned Islam and its fit in our Western culture, and dared to say people have a right to free association. He's been labeled all kinds of things, such as a white nationalist, a racist, and someone calling for racial separation, and been through the media rigmarole. And go ahead and hit that like button if you're just joining us. Share this video. Oh, we just got a super chat. Thank you so much. This is from Phoenix Fire 108 for $5. Let's see. For both of you, in World War I, at World War II, our warrior classes killed each other off. How would you rebuild the warrior classes and resurrect the warrior bloodlines? Well, I guess we can diverge a little bit. I mean, I'm not a geneticist. It's not my strong suit, but I would just offer, I don't know. We did have two major world wars 100 years ago, and they did take overwhelmingly from the Western populations in America, Canada, and Europe, some of our toughest and bravest men when they were at their youngest and before they had a chance to pass those warrior genes on. So we do probably, I would imagine, genetically have a little bit of a weakened genetic line out there right now. My personal suggestion, I suppose, for that would be is similar to what I'm always saying. We need to cut off or limit welfare, because that is just paying people who can't take care of themselves to breed more. And then we need to start getting, if we are going to have government-funded institutions that help people. We need to be encouraging people with higher IQs and a little bit hardier and stronger constitutions to be having more children. Or we could just, withdraw government support of individuals pretty much at all, leave it up to the community, leave it up to the churches, and require that there be some a reciprocal relationship. I can't say that word right now. Relationship. Thank you. Between, a church, charity, helping some people, for example, and making sure that the people who truly do need help and who can, rebound from their being down and out are given top priority here, and that we're not basically funding a lot of people who can't take care of themselves to have babies. That would be my suggestion. I don't know, Tom, have you ever thought of this issue?
Yeah, no, well, you know what, I don't talk about much, but my major's in history. I have an honors degree, and especially of World War II, White population was 21% of the world population in the year 1900. It's now 7% of the population. And I think when you look at it from the historical perspective, what happened with World War I, World War II, and parts of the Cold War, what history will look at it is a series of civil wars between the dominant European civilization that had different national fragments, where we basically destroyed one another and gave over control of our countries to extranational institutions and lost control of our own destinies and our fates. So I agree with the idea that we really need to recapture a sense of pride and identity in the West. And I think you see this in some European countries. Poland's a good example. Hungary, I think, they're moving in the right direction. And I think it's something where we need to really work to get past this idea of fighting each other on ideas. I don't quite agree with the alt-right concept of this, but New Albion has a concept called folkism, where it's really rooted in the idea that you support the family. And within the white community, I think that we are a family where, women are against men. I think, where other communities come together very easily, we fight each other very badly on ideas and divisions and abstract concepts. And I've always said and believe I can work with leftists who believe in the need to take care of people, as long as it's done in a way which respects the right view that we need to have personal responsibility at the heart of that. And if we can do that and come together on common purpose, I suspect what we would find is that we are all oppressed, not just whites, actually, I think a lot of races, by the same group of people who sort of control financial institutions, who create the divisions between us. And, if you look at the history of that, you can kind of see the impact they've had going back even to some of the big problems that came out of World War I, why America entered the war in the first place, what the Bolsheviks were really about. And, for people who are interested in history, I would say there is a narrative there to be found that's very different than what the media tells you, this sort of pantomime good versus evil view. And what you find, in fact, is that the West has largely been subverted, not to serve the interests of the people who live here, but rather where the labor efforts and wealth of the people here serve the interests of a select few who are using all the various countries to accomplish certain ends for themselves. And whether you think that's individuals who are corrupt or certain groups, the truth is it's very easy to say that, the majorities have not benefited. And I think that will continue to be a problem. And I hope that, we go ahead and change that, and that people do stand up and fight and spread awareness about these issues. And, one of the things I've been accused of is, from time to time, is I talk about things rather obliquely and in a very positive perspective. And I think that's important because, at the end of the day, I get fact-checked by the Washington Post on exactly what I say. So I'm very careful how I say things. But what I do encourage people, like your contributor there, is to do the research, spread the information, and know that people are becoming aware. The conversations I have with people about history, about society, about culture, in the age of the internet, in the age of alternate media, tells me more people are waking up. And as we wake up, the challenge for us all, and for those of us speaking, is to help people organize and to give them strength so that if you express your views, you aren't going to get fired. If you get doxxed, it isn't the end of your existence, because your community will back you. And that's what we're doing up here in New England. we work in a community by community basis. We build little groups where, maybe you have 10 families who can work together. And in a lot of ways, it's like the churches. And I think, honestly, one thing I would love to see develop is that the conversation happens between the churches, who need to understand that the culture that exists is opposed to allowing the expression of the truth that Jesus provided. I mean, I am a Christian. My wife is a Christian. And we need to come together, but we also need to understand that, what we have here, it's not good enough to just pray. We have to work to have a good society. And I think that's how we honor the example that was given to all of us in the charge which we face. And we have to face with strength, good character, and our faith.
Very well said. Yeah, and I really love what you pointed out about this folkism concept, this family concept, and this is something that I like to talk about. And it's not just about our nuclear families; it's about the very real genetic reality that we white people are related, that we are family. And 1/4 of us can trace our line back to Charlemagne, for example, and that we need to start thinking of ourselves as a family, as a tribe, and sort of have that identity. Very popularly, people know that, a black man, if he sees another black man, even though he might not know him individually, say, "Hey, what's up, brother?" And I think we white people need to have a sense of collective family identity as well, and not to give up on whites. And I've been kind of a little sad to see some of the people that are maybe in our movement, or kind of the fringes of the movement, of the far right movement, or the nationalist movement. And they've been kind of giving up on whites, and they've been focusing a little bit on IQ and saying, well, IQ is I just want high IQ people. And well, I understand high IQ is definitely something that, we want to encourage and we want to support. I think that we shouldn't give up on our white brothers and sisters, and even the liberal ones. And we should continue to have those conversations. And I think that we can all agree that even if we don't meet ideology-wise eye to eye on, what kind of social services or how much we should spend on those, et cetera, in government, that I think we would all rather live in amongst a diverse population of white liberals. As
Vermont is a beautiful place. That's all I'll say.
Right. So, we've got another super chat here, $5 from the Church of Terra. And he gave me a pronunciation guide this time, Sanctuaria. Thank you. There's no comment, just the pronunciation guide for his name. I really appreciate your support. This is a regular supporter of mine, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, that's tuning in right now and using that super chat. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I think that we need to not give up on each other. I think that we need to continue to dialogue with each other and not be super obsessed with debating these ideas. And I think Henrik from Red Ice said once, once we, have our existence secure as white people, then I'll be happy to have the conversation about whether we should have a pagan ethno-state and a Christian ethno-state, or Protestant ethno-state versus a Catholic ethno-state. But until we get
all
to
those
that
can
point,
coexist. I mean, they can. I mean, the thing that's interesting about it too is it's like so much of this is caught up in centralization of power, right? Because if the states had the freedom which they were designed to have, and localities had the taxing authority they should have, and it shouldn't be all federally centered, you could have distinctive communities adopt approaches that are appropriate for them. I mean, I live in a rural community where we don't really want government to do many things, but it does need to do certain things. Now, if I lived in a city, and I've lived in a city much of my life, I might want government to do much more. And having this one-size-fits-all approach forced on us really causes so much more conflict than absolutely necessary.
Oh, yeah, totally. I agree. We have another super chat, $5 from Phoenix Fire 108. Thank you for donating again. And the comment is, would you visit the Black ethno-state of Wakanda that's featured in Marvel's Black Panther? And I think that's not just a question for us, but I think also for those who are watching. I'm not familiar with that
it's
particular
fictional.
comment.
It's in Egypt.
Okay, in Egypt. So yeah, so I can't speak to the. I don't know, Tom. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, what I would say is that if we follow voluntary separation through to its sort of extremist ideal, you end up with distinctive cultures that might be interesting to visit. I mean, I'm someone who enjoys going somewhere different from time to time because it's different. And one of the things I would note with the global agenda is the effort to make us all the same. You know, what they call diversity is really homogenization, forcing people to become indistinct from one another. And so, I don't know if I'd go to Wakanda, but I've always had interest in different cultures. I'd love to go to Japan, for instance, to visit them and see what they experience, and not with the idea that they need to be like us or we need to be like them, just recognizing that they have some good concepts, and maybe you take a little bit of their ideas and they take a little bit of yours, and otherwise you can live in peace and prosperity. I don't accept the zero-sum game idea that, one group benefits and another suffers. I mean, I think that's what the left thinks, and I think it's that sort of racial animus they use, honestly, to within the black community. Let's be honest, they put in policies that create a more expansive welfare state, so they become more dependent, not because they want them to have freedom. They want to have captive voters. And you see the same thing. I grew up in Arizona, with why Latino votes came in. And it's not just a Democrat Republican thing, because the Republicans wanted cheap labor, the Democrats wanted votes. And I understand these people coming up out of Mexico and Guatemala, they wanted a better life. And people don't understand that NAFTA dumped a bunch of cheap subsidized corn on Mexico and pushed them up. So one thing I've kind of learned over the years in working in government is look how the money works. Follow who controls the money, who pushes the money, where it goes, and you'll find how people follow it. And if there's one thing I would encourage people to do, it's to stop thinking of your life in terms of your finances and start thinking in terms of the quality of life and culture. I gave up money to move up here to Maine, and you know what? Even though I'm unemployed, it was absolutely the right decision, because my wife and I now enjoy living in health and safety around people who we like and in a good community. And a time is coming, I think, when that's going to matter more than ever. I mean, we have some economic prosperity now, thanks to the president. It's a great opportunity for people to reconsider and relocate themselves to locations where they can best experience the cultural aspects of life they care about, whatever fits, their particular desires and circumstance.
Oh, yes, I completely agree. And kind of getting to your point about the globalization of everything and how it isn't true diversity, I completely agree with that. I often think of it as the Walmart, on every block culture, where, when I was a little girl in the 80s and 90s, and my parents liked to travel a lot, we lived in Las Vegas, so we traveled around the West a lot. When we would go down into somewhere like Arizona, where you're from, or we would go over to California, those were two very distinct cultures. They were different. You'd have different stores, you'd have different, foods, you'd have different opportunities to interact with people in different ways, and different art and culture. And, as the 90s kind of progressed, I noticed that, driving through California, Arizona, Nevada, anywhere like that, it all started to look the same. It was, every highway exit was, Walmart, McDonald's, Bed Bath and Beyond, just this,
Sure.
the same
Jack in the Box.
Yeah, exactly. Over and over and over again. And it just spread like a disease throughout the country. And as I traveled more and more, it was like, okay, now it's in Colorado, and now it's, it's in North Carolina. And just now everything looks the same. And the town I was born in, for example, they didn't even have a Mexican restaurant, I think, until the 90s or something. But now you can drive through that town, and, they have Japanese food, they have Chinese food, they have all these different things. And I thought, well, yeah, but what's lost is a lot of those mom and pop places that were local to that culture that have now closed down. And what are we trading it for? Like, I mean, is Taco Bell's not real Mexican food anyways, and we've got them on every corner, and that's not real diversity. And I also enjoy
and it's
travel.
Economically terrible too. I mean, if you think about it, say you had a Main Street America, like where I spent the last 10 years living in Western Pennsylvania, and you see a lot of places that were hollowed out. Walmart Supercenter comes in, right?
Yes.
It's great. It's an economic opportunity, maybe, but here's what happens. So then the grocer shuts down, the tool store shuts down, and the people who own those shops, who put the money back into the community, now they're gone, so they can't hire anyone. So, and they do studies on this. If you own a small business in a community, you usually kick up about 80 cents on the dollar back into that community and what you spend there. versus if you have a big box store, it's 30 cents on the dollar. So what you've essentially done is you destroy your tax base, you destroy people living there. So then you have more people making less, more people calling on the government, and less ability to pay for it. So what happens is people move and towns get shuttered, and then you end up with truck stops along the highway and everyone being pushed into the city. Because once you create a situation where everyone has the same stores anyway, what's the point of living in the country? And that's what has happened more and more. And I think it's no accident. You know, when people live in cities, I find, as someone who grew up in suburbs and in cities and who now lives in the country, you don't have the space to know people as they are. You don't have the space to express yourself. You don't know who you're dealing with in your community. And when you don't know, or when you're around people with a lot of different thoughts, you look for government as an intermediary because you know there's going to be issues. And I understand that's sort of an inescapable thing. But the one thing I'd say about where I live now and why I moved intentionally up into northern New England is, I think more so than anywhere else in the U.S., we've tried to preserve our small towns. And I think it's an issue that goes beyond sort of left-right thinking. But I think that has been at the key of preserving the culture of the family mattering, of education being valued. I mean, if you look at things from the perspective of the degrees attained and use test scores as a proxy for other things, New England does the best in America. And even though it has some terrible ideas that come out of certain people in this region, what people don't realize up here in northern Appalachia is that in a lot of ways, we really are trying to keep the old way together. And unfortunately, the challenge for us is we have the oldest population in America. And the kids couldn't stay here because there were no jobs. And, I don't know if it's going to be gone. But like you said, I think we need to fight for it. And I think people are starting to, and that's really encouraging to me. And we'll see where we can build this. If we keep talking, the more attention they draw to us, the better we'll do, because everything bad they could say about us is baked in. It's old news from fake news. And so they can call me whatever horrible name they want. I don't really care at this point. The only thing they can't do is give me a platform for the ideas, because when I debate them, or I suspect you have the same experience, when you debate them, more people come away hearing and understanding our beliefs than what we started with.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's been my experience. And, I kind of try to remind myself that no press is bad press, even though I take a little bit of a hit individually, just as a person, that it's always good. It's always good for our movement anytime that they talk about me in the press. And that was one of the things I noticed about some of these articles on about you, and that I kind of made a note of, that they said, that you're not available for comment and things like that at the end of a lot of these articles. And I don't know if you didn't give them a comment, but one of the things that they do to me quite often is they don't bother to try to get a comment. My email and ways to contact me are out there. They're available quite easily. And most of the time, I would say about 4 out of 5 times, they don't even bother to try to contact me, because they don't want a quote to use. They don't want me to say something rational. They want to make it look like I'm in hiding or something like this. And so they will often say at the end of these articles, we tried to reach Miss Stewart for comment, but she was unavailable, or something like this. Now, there definitely are times when I turn them down and simply say I'm not commenting. But a lot of times they'll pull that to make me look worse than I am, or look like these ideas don't have a defense. Because they don't want to give me a platform to actually speak what's going on. But I love what you said about, like, getting back to the local culture. This is one of the things, because I used to be a liberal back in college in particular, and right before I had several children. And one of the things that I carried over, one of the things that really made sense to me as a liberal, and that I've carried over to now that I'm in the far right, is that idea of preserving local culture, local distinction, that kind of shop local, be local, grow your own food, like those sorts of movements, local education.
It's self-sufficiency, right?
Exactly. And that's very popular on the left. In fact, when I lived in Northern California, there was it was much like how you're describing in Maine. They tried very much there, especially in the small communities, to preserve their town and their culture and their mom and pop shops. They were very proud of their, we had an organic fast food place where I lived. We had a place called Mendo Mill, which was a local, kind of like a smaller version maybe of Walmart, but more geared to towards country people. So they had like, horse supplies, saddles and things like this. But it was kind of like we really prided ourselves on shopping at those places and maybe spending a few dollars more, but knowing we're supporting our community. And I always said, God help the Starbucks or Walmart that tried to move into, 100-mile radius within where I lived in Northern California, because they had, thousands of these old hippies from San Francisco that now lived up in more northern parts of California, descending upon them with, petitions and email signatures. And I mean, they're having town halls and they're saying, we're not having a Walmart Supercenter. We're not bringing in a Starbucks. I remember when they brought a Starbucks into the town where I lived, they had to literally sneak it in. They snuck it in during a reconstruction on a grocery store, and they snuck it into the grocery store so that nobody knew about it, because they couldn't get one in. And even then, it was incredibly shameful for most people in town for you to go to that Starbucks. Like, you should be going to, we had a place called Paradise Coffee. Like, you better be seen at Paradise Coffee, not, going to the Starbucks. And so, that was something that I actually thought was beneficial, again, as you said, economically, as far as local employment and keeping your tax base. And then as far as diversity goes, and actually having a unique culture and a unique experience of where you live, kind of a sense of camaraderie amongst the people that you live. I mean, no one's getting a sense of camaraderie when they go to the Walmart,
No, absolutely. You're just hoping you don't end up on the People of Walmart website, You ever see those? They're terrible, but
yes, they are really shocking.
Yeah, no, it's. I used to work as a courier earlier in my life, and I ended up making a lot of 3 a.m. trips to Walmart, and it's certainly an educating experience. That's the truth. No, but it's interesting. It's kind of like an inversion, right? Because like if you look at left ideas and right ideas, what I've found over life is that the left seems obsessed with doing things at the highest level, and the right kind of focuses at the lowest level, like individuals and families. But if you actually look at what works, just in terms of the actual outcomes, having a sort of right-leaning philosophy at the top, where you have, a lot of freedom, government doesn't do too much, and there's a lot of options, works good. But some of the left-leaning philosophies, the communal thinking, work really well within a community, not where they're coercive forces, but like where, up here, you'd be having your coffee at Mama Bear's and going to Bishop's, for your pizza. We don't have any fast food places here. Our nearest fast food place, at least we speak English and not French, is 72 miles south of us. And I have to say, it's fantastic living. When I moved up here, I weighed 40 pounds more than I do today, 6 months later. And that's just from having access to healthy food and making some better life decisions. Maybe a little bit of stress, but not too much of that. But I think it's something we had. And, when I started New Albion, I really hoped to present it in a way where it was neither left-leaning nor right-leaning, because I think we need to put identity over ideology. And I really feel if you have good people who have good backgrounds, and I think, part of that is it's useful to have certain homogeneities, but I think that there's room within that for people of good character of all sorts of backgrounds, who are in the same culture. You put that together, because ultimately family extends a little bit, right? And you don't need to exclude the people who get what you're about. I've never argued that, and I don't think that's healthy. I think people go down those purity paths, and America's never really been about that. I mean, maybe in other places. But that there's an opportunity really to realize a much better future. And that's why I think things are good in certain places. It's why I live in Maine, and why, to be honest with you, I have a movement that's, set in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. And we didn't include Massachusetts because Massachusetts largely is about the money, and it's about these sort of, mixes of different ideas that just don't work up here. And, it's sort of derogatory to say, but everyone in northern New England calls them massholes for a reason. You know what I mean? And it's because they come with all the money, right? They make a lot more money than we do up here on average. They spend it, and they act like they run the place. And up here in the northern woods, I think people came up here because they were looking to get away and realize a different life. And, whether that's sort of conservatives in Maine, your hardcore libertarians in New Hampshire, or the hardcore socialists in Vermont, actually we have a lot more in common than you think, and you can travel all throughout this region, and you don't even realize, if you get away from the national politics aspect of it, that these are people who get along together. And if I live in New Hampshire, and I lived there for 2 years, and I lived like 10 minutes from Vermont, there's some things I love in Vermont that I would drive over to get, And then if I had to buy certain things, I'd stay where I don't have to pay a state sales tax in New Hampshire. And having that sort of diversity of options as well within, a culture that kind of respects all of those things is really good. And, it works, but it's a funny thing, and it's an ironic thing, right? Because since I live in such a white area, that what happens is people love diversity because they don't understand what it is to live outside of uniculture. If you spend time in Vegas, then you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember growing up in Phoenix, there were neighborhoods you didn't go in if you looked like me and, if you didn't speak very good Spanish. And I spoke enough Spanish and speak enough Spanish to know what they were saying and to understand the people who were coming here were not coming here to, realize the American dream, but rather to recreate something for themselves and take our resources. And I'm not saying that's everyone. I know a lot of people who immigrate here come here with the best of intentions, and I don't want to paint a broad brush about people who come here legally. Even if I don't think the process is the best, there are good people in that. However, I think that we need to really think about what we bring in when we bring in outsiders. And frankly, my own perspective on it is we've brought in too many for too long. We need to sit down, have a conversation, not bring anyone else in, and try to fix our culture. And that's why I focus on things at the cultural aspect rather than the political. I've been a candidate before, and I've run for office. I've run campaigns. I have a history in that area. But it doesn't really matter if you are running on good policy if you don't have people who can appreciate and make them work. And the best policies really require people to have a greater sense of personal responsibility and social responsibility than they've had to this point. And I hope that, we are able to encourage that, and within our various movements and media efforts, encourage people to step up and actually, be the leaders they want. And it could be as simple as like what you talked about, buying things in your community and, standing up and supporting someone who says something that, maybe is a little controversial, but you support free speech. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it. And I really think going micro, I think the left has a good point in that. If you can get together with 5 or 6 different families who agree with the way you look at things, well, then you're not alone. And if something happens to you for speaking out, well, you have a support structure that can maybe help carry you along. So let it be about that, and let the community form organically. And I think we have only good things emerge from that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that if everybody watching tonight and later as a recording can take anything away from this, I think choosing culture over money and over the success that we think it comes with, these rich lifestyles or these comfortable lifestyles. I actually was visiting with a family, some friends today, and they have 9 children, and they live in a 1,200 square foot home. But it is a lovely, warm, inviting home. The children are happy. They play together. They have 20 acres of land, and they've got goats and sheep and everything else. And now, certainly they could have chosen a larger house, and they could have chosen a smaller amount of land. But I tell you, their daughters know how to take care of sheep and how to, feel a goat and know if she's pregnant, and if she is, what position the baby's in. I mean, these are, young girls, and they have so much going for them. This is a very religious family, church attending, traditional family. And I just, I can't help but be struck at their wonderful example that they obviously chose having this family culture, this really this educational experience for their children, but this loving experience for their children over, every child having their own bedroom and all of these other nonsensical things that we're told that we should value. And, if you can get your food local, or at least some of your food, support your farmers market, support your local farmers, support local entertainment, instead of going and dropping $10 or $20 on the new Star Wars movie, you can get a ticket to your local theater. I have a friend who is an actress, and she does local theater, and that is a wonderful thing we don't want to lose. And that's a wonderful place to really educate and uplift people, support your local theater and, local coffee shops and things, as we've said. And that will really start to build the culture back up. And if I've seen over
and then
my
you don't
life,
need government anymore. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Once you're solving your own problems, you provide for your own food, and you trust your neighbors.
Yes.
Well, then you don't need to spend as much on security, because
Oh
all of a
yeah.
sudden you already have things taken care of. And then when your community, I mean, one of the terrible things that was done to us was that the removal of charity, and the government ended up taking over different things. And it was done to make people dependent the same sort of way. And now people don't want to give because they say, hey, I pay taxes for that. I'm like, the only way you'll ever stop paying taxes for social services is if you adopt a charitable lifestyle where you're engaged in your community, like you're saying.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And it creates a relationship, when you go to your farmer's market and you get to know these people, and my kids have gone to the farm, we've bought maybe tomatoes from the same guy for, half a year, and then he's invited to say, hey, come to the farm, come see how we do it. We used to live next to a farm that used live power, where they actually used horses and things instead of tractors.
Oh, cool.
They would invite families out, homeschooling families, to come check that out. And you form relationships. And I always felt so safe that way, because I always thought, if there was some kind of collapse, some kind of government collapse, we know our local farmers, right? We know who's growing our food. They know us, they care about us. We have that relationship there, and it was really nice. And I didn't feel like I needed to depend on the government. In fact, it felt like the government could collapse, and we would be okay in our little area, because
Sure.
we have formed these connections, and we're emotional creatures. And I think that we're not going to get as much done. Politics is a great sport to watch. It's almost like the Super Bowl. You're voting, well, yay, Republicans or Democrats, and it can be really fun and addictive that way. But that's not really where a lot of the change comes from. And I think, as we've all seen, even with somebody like Trump, who I support and I voted for, you're not going to see drastic change from administration to administration, even though they're on different party tickets. But where you will see change, and where I've seen change in my lifetime, is at the local community level. Just something, in my life, when I had my first child, he's 14 now, almost 15. I did things like I breastfed long term. I had a home birth. I carried him in a sling, and did something called attachment parenting. And it was completely unheard of at the time. Like, people looked at me like I was insane. But now you go out, it doesn't matter, anywhere in America, and people have heard of attachment parenting. They know about slings. They know about backpack carriers for babies. They know about, it's important to breastfeed past 1 year. All of that has kind of saturated our culture now. And it started in very local movements of moms getting together and saying, this is how we want to parent, and this is what we want it to look like. And it was a good idea. And so it spread. And that's wonderful to see. And I've seen that make more real change in everyday people's lives than I've ever seen politics actually make changes. So,
well, I mean, if you think about it, right, like, it's putting nature back at the center of things, right? A mother wanting to be close to her baby. How much more natural does it get than that? And when we did New Albion, and I was putting this together, it took us months to figure out what we wanted to be about, because figuring out how to talk about things concretely when you've talked abstractly is difficult. But we put nature as our first value, and people look at that and they sort of think, well, maybe that just means, we like trees. And of course we like trees. We're up in Maine. There's a lot of trees up here, but it really means this. It means that we have an essential nature that we need to understand. And the nature is, we are social beings and individuals. We are people who care for our young and our families. And we need to pull on those connections and build a society based on the truth of who we are and what we can do and how we connect to one another. And as we did that, we've kind of found that the separation between us starts to disappear. And then you can get to the point where, I've always said, people are intimidated by politics because it's such a big system, and there's so many institutions between politics and media and academia. But what is really missed in that is that it's a huge system because it has to be, because it's selling you something you don't naturally want. It has to cover every aspect of it, right? It's why we had to be demonized, because if you just take a step outside the system, not even a full step, just a half step, you start getting your own food, you start growing your own food, you start having these family connections, you start to realize really quickly, what do we need all these people for? And if there's ever going to be an awakening in this country that's really positive, it's going to be when enough people step outside of the rat race and say, you know what, I can do this on my own. And we're getting there. More and more people are embracing that sort of back to the land lifestyle. And, I can't ever imagine going back to a city. You talk about a collapse scenario. Who's going to feed them?
Yeah.
Who's going to drive the trucks in there? The cops aren't going to protect them. Those people will be gone. And what will happen is that nature will win out. It's the same thing, all the social programming, saying there's 27 genders. Well, I guarantee you 25 of them are going to disappear the moment the power goes off. You know what I mean? And
Yes,
so
yes.
all this silliness that gets promoted, like it's just, people just coming up with new things to have outrage about. It doesn't matter. And and,
Yeah.
and that's what it is. Get back to nature, get back to your loved ones, Up here, me and my wife live simply. We don't have a family, unfortunately. My wife has some health issues that preclude that, which is a tragedy to us both. But I take care of her, and said she has some health issues. She fights chronic Lyme disease,
Oh,
which is,
sorry.
if you're familiar with that at all,
Mhm.
it's an epidemic up here, and that's another story that one day I'll get into. But it's we take care of each other, and we go down, we go to a local farmers market. We know the cows before they become the steaks, and some people are disgusted by that, but I think it's honest.
Oh, yeah, that's
And
beautiful.
so we eat them. We participate in the community, we spend here, and we make a point to reach out and to talk to people. And up here, we do that. We go up to Canada, we talk to the Quebecois, and they're kind of the same way. And it's a different culture, but you have an honest conversation, and I think people like that. So, and I think it's a positive vision, like you're saying, that we can move in these cultural directions because, politics constrains people. That's what it does. It prevents people from doing things, and right now it's constraining us. It's telling us we're less than what we should be. It takes away our history and makes it into something that's evil. It takes away our ability to identify as a group and says, you don't have that right. It gives rights, certain legal protections, financial incentives to other groups, and says you can't have those things. And we need to take that back. But the struggle, the political struggle, will only succeed when people do so culturally. If you're sitting there waiting for the politician to do it, it's not going to happen. I mean, Trump is a reprieve that's giving you the space to accomplish this, and I give him all the credit in the world for that. But realistically, government is going to actively seek to work against you because people in power tend to think they're right. They like control, and that's how they're going to push this. So, step up, get involved with your local groups, your local thing, and figure out how to make your life make sense. And you can
Mhm.
do these in ways where you are not political actors, but just do it in ways that are sincere to your beliefs and honest about what you see rather than what you're told to believe. And if you end up in a situation where, there's something out there that's a value that you're told you must support and you don't, and the facts don't back it, don't support it. That's all. And vote however you can, not just the ballot box, but how you live. And I think
Mhm.
that's the good life as much as we can live it. And if enough people do that, then there become peaceful paths to go ahead and realize what we all want. Because otherwise, it will end up being a fight that's imposed against us by people who want to impose their views. And then whatever happens, happens, but it will be an ugly tragedy that should have been avoided because we could have done things a much better way for everyone involved, regardless of their ideologies or their different backgrounds.
Oh yeah, definitely. And well, I just, please give your wife my best. I can't
Thank you.
imagine how much it must be difficult to struggle with that. And I think with the health condition like that, and then also, not having a family because of health issues. And I think that one of these things that, what we've been talking about tonight is that if we get back to seeing our people and our community as our family, I think that it's really important to realize that even if you don't have your own biological children, that you do have children. I like to
Sure.
emphasize, if you're an American, if you're a white person, like my kids are your kids too. They really are, and you can help love them and take care of them and make sure that there's a great future for them by doing the kind of work we're talking about tonight, and also just being active in your local community, being an example. I know, my son, who's a teenager, he's at that age where male mentors are just like, I can't get enough male mentors for this guy. Is like he
Sure.
loves to go out with guys, and he likes to go out with scouts and go camping and backpacking, and there's so many things that people can do. And if we really are a tight-knit community for that, I think that then everybody has a place. Everybody has a place,
Sure.
and their place is important. And that,
Well, it's not just that too, but like I will tell you, my biggest supporters up here were young people. Actually, my most fervent supporter was a 15-year-old girl who just wasn't buying the narrative, and she went out there and she was ferocious, and I give her all the credit in the world. And with the kids thing, I really do believe in realizing that future for white children. I do,
Mhm.
and what I do, Dana and I, dealing with the health issues of day to day, not knowing how we're going to survive and different things is hard, but it helps you gain strength to fight struggle, and it helps you get foundation in your faith. And for us, because of that, perhaps we can take this fight places other people cannot. And
Mhm.
we do it because we do see all those children out there as the children we're fighting for. She has, I think, I know at least 3 nephews, and I have 2 nephews and 2 nieces that I'm fighting for. And even though their parents are not political the way we are, if we succeed in making these things happen, those kids, our bloodlines, will have better futures. And so we do what we can. And I think that's important. If everyone can contribute something, and whether your fights at home or people out here in the public sphere are who you want to support, that's fine. But that's what I go out there and do. And I always ask if people are willing to support that. It's welcome. If you go to newalbion.org, you can see some ways to have a free starter up. If you use Gab, if you don't use Gab for your social media, you should. They're one of the few free speech places left as a premium creator, because I'm going out there and I'm taking this fight to them. We're going to go ahead probably in the coming months here and call attention to some of the things they're doing, but putting Somalis in our community that aren't wanted, and asking some hard questions. And they're going to say lots of awful things about me. And that's fine. I don't comment on media, but I make the offer to anyone. I will go live on any show of any agenda, because I'm willing to put my message out there and have a conversation with someone. I just will not sit and let editors spend their time casting me as something I'm not, because I tried. I tried really hard to not have it be that way. And I realized that, as you said, and what caused this whole thing is there is an agenda, and they will not allow you to be heard on that way. But I thank you so much for the opportunity to come on here and have this conversation, so we can, put out that, apparently all the separatists and supremists are pretty nice people that you might want to be around. And, if that's the separatism we have, those are virtuous against those who, believe in censorship, well, I'm okay with being called a separatist on that basis. And I'd gladly fight alongside you in this battle, and, for the Lord as well.
Oh, excellent. Yes, I agree. And I, starving out the leftist media is kind of one of the best ways to go, because they are never going to tell the tale straight. They're always going to spin it, twist it, lie. And if we can go do things like what you've done, and go on Red Ice TV, or come on my channel, go on other channels, start your own YouTube channel, start your own, support, and for those that are watching as live and watching as a recording, go to newalbion.org, go to Tom Kawczynski's Gab, sign up for his premium, help support him and get this message out. And because this is really where it's at. We're voting with our dollars, we're voting with our time, we're voting with our effort, and what we're concentrating on, and saving New England culture and preserving it. I mean, first letting New Englanders know they have a culture. I know
Sure.
a lot of white Americans and white people in general, Europeans, Americans, Canadians, and Australians, we've been told we have no culture,
Right.
and that was a big.
You're only allowed to be ethnic. That's the only thing they allow.
Yes,
only
exactly.
Sometimes.
So, like for me, I am genetically about almost exactly 50% German, 50% British. And so it's like, well, yeah, I have to pick one, or, I can only be proud of being German or British or whatever. No, I want to be proud of being white. Even that 1% Finnish, I want to be proud of that in my DNA. I want to be proud of even the people that I'm, the Polish people next door. I want to be proud of them too.
Sure.
And that kind of gets me. We have a super chat here before we wrap things up. We've got another one from Phoenix Fire 108. He says, in your opinion of the European cultures, which one is your favorite? Which has the best aesthetic? Do you have an opinion on that, Tom?
Oh man, I have to think about. I'm a little partial to my Eastern Europeans right now, just because I sort of think they've defended their traditional cultures well. But I honestly think, they all have things to contribute. The Northern European cultures, the way the Scandinavians did things, really fits well what we did up here, and it's kind of a shame to see what Sweden has done to itself. But I don't know. I'm mostly Polish, a little bit Russian, a little bit German. So I'm going to have to go with my own people on this one. But I think there are many beautiful ones, to be appreciated for sure.
Yeah. I think I would have to go with my own kind of genetics on that, which I kind of look at as like Saxon, because I'm German and I'm British. So a little bit, Anglo-Saxon, kind of those sorts of people. I would have to pick, but I absolutely adore Eastern European culture. In fact, when I did my DNA test, I was telling everybody I kind of hoped that one of my grandmas had cheated with a Russian or something, because I wished I had some Slavic DNA, because I just.
Well, the one thing about being a Slav is we just don't care. So we just stand stand up and fight anybody, which honestly we need a
Yeah.
little bit of that. So
Yeah, I wish that my Anglo people that we had a little bit more of that spitfire that the Slavs have, and then of course just aesthetically, I think Eastern European culture is just unbelievably
But if you're a
beautiful.
Saxon, like if you look at, use examples, was it places like Dresden before the war,
Mm,
absolutely gorgeous, or a city like
yeah,
Nuremberg. A lot of the
yeah,
German architecture was fantastic.
yeah.
Great cities, or even now, I mean, to be honest with you, some of the Polish cities are really German if we're honest about,
True.
Wrocław was
Yeah.
Breslau, and Danzig's Dansk and all that. And hopefully, I mean, I kind of hope that the Germans kind of learn from the Polish example at some point, because what Chancellor Merkel has done over there is absolutely disgusting. I mean,
Hmm.
you can survive bad policy for generations. We've seen that, some
Yes.
terrible regimes, but you can't survive demographic replacement,
Hmm.
because the people just are not the same. And
Yes.
part of it's culture, obviously, but if you wholesale replace a population, you can't get that back.
Oh yeah.
And I really worry, and it's intentional. We all understand that. I mean, the whole thing could have been prevented if one navy in Europe had the gumption to shoot down one of those NGO ships, And I know
Yeah.
that might be a controversial thing to say, but
Yeah.
the crisis of the West is a lack of faith in our own beliefs and ideals. And after 2 wars, after which we exhausted ourselves, I understand why people feel that way, but we need to get it back, and we need to get back something we're willing to fight for. And if whatever we come up with isn't worth fighting for, we're going to lose. And it doesn't matter how much money and wealth we have. That's why you have these Muslim third worlders coming into these countries and taking over, because they at least have the will of their own beliefs. And as misguided as they are, at least they're willing to fight for them. And in Europe, they've been taught for so many years all they should care about
Mhm.
is their own personal comfort and happiness. They don't have legacy. They don't have a care for the
Yeah.
kids. They don't see themselves as stewards for the next generation. And that's why legacy was a core value of what I'm doing up here, and why, even though I work up here, I've become a national advocate for white civil rights, because we need that for all of us.
Yeah.
Because it won't do good if we just have a little enclave up here and we get surrounded. We've seen how that goes historically. All of
Mhm.
us are in this together, and we have to enjoy the fight together.
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree. Yeah. I think that if I had to pick a culture that if you just wanted to like plot me down in, I would say that there's a great show, you can get it on Amazon Prime, called Lark Rise to Candleford. And it's the late 19th century English culture, right before the turn of
Mhm.
the century. And I think that's probably, where I feel like I would fit the best and would be my favorite. Back when we didn't let the poor starve, but the poor went to poor houses and they worked
Mhm.
for their bread, and there was aristocracy and all of these
Mhm.
lovely things and tradition and thought to the future. And so hopefully this is what is being revived with projects like yours with the New Albion. And again, newalbion.org. Please check it out. Please subscribe to Tom Kaczynski's premium content on Gab. Give him some support. I want to give a shout out to Clayton Moorhead, who is in the chat this evening. And the chat has been very lively and very active. And he has done some darn hard work as a moderator. And I just want to say thank you, Clayton. I really appreciate it. I've been kind of taking a peek at this every now and again. And I want to just thank my regular supporters. Thank you for everybody who participated in the chat. Thank you so much to those who sent us some super chats, some great questions there on the super chat, and appreciate the support. And I think that if there's a takeaway again from this conversation tonight, it is, get in your local community, find out what your culture is. If you don't know in your local community, find out what your local white culture is, find out ways that you can support that with your time, your talents, your effort, and your dollars, and try to starve out those things that are against our best interests, like the Walmart supercenters and the media, the leftist media.
Sure.
Try to starve those out. Don't give them your money. Don't give them your time.
And remember this, the other side is incredibly well funded because they're giving you something you don't want. It sucks that those of us who have to work hardest have to contribute to our own. I get that. But if you don't, then we don't have the ability to survive, because they literally destroy our economic ability to exist. That's how they try to make lessons of us. And every time you let one person not become a lesson, then that means more people will speak out. And if enough people speak out, then the media will begin to get tumbled. And that's what we really need to do, that we need to realize this so that we can have these conversations without fear or prejudice.
Yes, it's exponential. I mean, the more people that we're able to support in our movement right now and make sure that for families like mine and families like yours, when we do lose our ability to go out in a regular marketplace and compete in a regular marketplace because we've had our names smeared, I mean, it was me who was mostly in the paper, but of course my husband has been completely smeared, demonized. There's people actually, trying to track down his employment, anywhere we go. And so, support the people that are out there, especially the ones that have their real names, their real faces. And the more people say, hey, look, they tried to take Tom down, they tried to take Ayla down, they couldn't do it. They had support from their community. It grows. The more people can come out, the more people can use their
and the
real
more
name.
we can speak out and go ahead and lead this in positive directions, because we want to. I can only speak for myself, but I know your work. I was familiar with you before we had these conversations, and I really appreciated that people were out there willing to do it like yourself, and I'm willing to go. I mean, you talk about fitting in 19th century Europe. Give me a hussar helmet and send me in the right direction. I'm ready to go charging off, and that's what I'm going to be doing now, because they made it personal. I wasn't bothering them, and they decided that they could come up to a small town and try to roll someone, and they made a mistake. And when they think they can tell you what to do, they're making the same mistake, and it's up to each of us to teach them that lesson as many times as it takes until they learn.
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree with you. So hit that like and subscribe button, push the little bell so that you get the notifications every time I go live. I usually do a live Thursday night show, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 Pacific, but I also do other interviews and live streams throughout the week. I'm doing more and more as I can. And as you guys continue to support me, I'm doing more and more of that, interviewing some really great guests. I've got another elder interview coming up on Monday. I'm super excited for that. Preserving our culture, capturing that wisdom, and this is what it's all about, and creating that future for our children and for our people. And if I just feel really inspired by tonight's talk, and if you feel really inspired, and if you like what Tom had to say, I mean, I think this guy is sharp as a tack. This is a smart guy, and he's got a lot of wisdom, and he's got a lot of punch and energy behind him, and a lot of courage of his conviction. Let's support him. Let's make sure that his voice does not die out, that he is not a candle flame that's going to slowly burn out. Let's put some tinder in there and start a bonfire with this guy. Let's support him. newalbion.org. Go to his Gab, sub to his premium content. Do what you can. Share this video. Get this information out there. Share it on your Facebook with your normie friends. Spread the message. I want to thank you, Tom, so much for coming on tonight. It was really great to talk to you, and I would love to have you back and maybe pick some of these. I have so many notes from tonight's talk that I kind of wanted to dive deeper into.
No, we can have these conversations. I'd love to, and as I get going, I figure out how to actually do the technical aspects. I'd love to have you on too, so we can have some continuing conversations. And everything is on the table, and we try to put it out there. One thing I think you and I both do very well is we make this very normie friendly. I mean, I think a lot of people don't necessarily have that ability just yet, but we need to do that so that people can start getting woken up a little bit. And so I thank you so much for having me on there for our conversation. I'm happy to come on in the future. I think probably about 2-3 months from now, I'm going to have a book about this, kind of talking about some of the historical background of, when I was sitting there. I'll close with this. When I was sitting there in that room and all the cameras were on me and all the people were looking at me, I was thinking, how have I become the one that's the weird one in here? And people don't understand that story because they don't understand the history. So my history is kind of an introduction to a much larger question that I want people to become aware of, because once we know our past, we can begin to take back our future. And I'm very excited about going able to argue about that. And, we can talk about some of these other issues, because I know there's a lot of doors we didn't go down just because we were talking about the event. But I like to think, I thank you for the compliments. You've been incredibly gracious to myself and to my wife, so I appreciate that. And I would just say thank you once again for the opportunity, newalbion.org. If anyone watching this interview has any questions of me, newalbion@protonmail.com. I answer all of my emails in relatively quick order. Certainly welcome that. Welcome any support of any kind, your prayers, your blessings. And just want to say God bless everyone watching tonight. And thank you very much, Ayla. I appreciated it.
Thank you so much. Well, that's all we have for tonight, but I think this conversation is going to continue. So please remember to hit that subscribe button, click the like, share the video, do what you can. And I hope you guys have a really great rest of your evening. And I hope you have a wonderful time going into your weekend. Find a local event, find a local spot to hang out at this weekend. Kind of set yourself a little challenge there. Where's your culture? Find it and support it this weekend. And we will talk to you later. And I will definitely see you back again here at Wife with a Purpose. Thanks so much. Good evening.